6 agonizing weeks hunting for Nancy Guthrie. 6 weeks of deafening silence from Tommaso Cioni, the son-in-law who gave her that final ride and vanished from the public eye. Then there is Annie Guthrie. Her vehicle languished in an impound lot for weeks, meticulously dismantled by investigators chasing ghosts before being quietly returned. And Dominic Evans, a bandmate of 19 years carrying heavy felony convictions for robbery and burglary, whose height and build told a darker story. His facial hair mirrored the FBI suspect profile flawlessly, but evidence suggested another shadow looming. Derek Kayla, a phantom from Tommaso's own musical circle, slapped in handcuffs for firing off a chilling ransom text straight to the couple's personal cell phones. He bypassed Savannah, he bypassed the feds. The violent threat went directly to Tommaso himself. Then there was the neighbor's surveillance footage. The cameras mysteriously blacked out on just one side of the house, the exact angle facing Nancy's property. We are talking about an 84-year-old matriarch whose evening heart pills sat untouched by dawn, her hearing aids abandoned inside while she was dragged into the unforgiving desert darkness. 42 days, over 40,000 tips, 10,000 hours of videotape, and the full weight of the FBI, customs agents, scent dogs, cutting-edge genetic genealogy, and an elite task force operating out of a secure federal bunker. Yet nobody has been officially named, 0 suspects, 0 persons of interest. Not a single arrest has been made. The entire country is whispering the exact same question. Has the trail gone cold because this predator was a ghost? Or is the justice system quietly collapsing? According to the Arizona Republic this week, we might finally have an answer. It all points back to the man pulling the strings, the very commander who inexplicably released a contaminated crime scene in less than 20 hours. The chief who shipped crucial genetic evidence out to Florida, rather than Quantico, boldly contradicting federal agents on national television. That same official was quietly pushed out of his first police gig 44 years ago. His offense? Allegedly booting a suspect in the skull hard enough to mandate intensive care. 37 days of disciplinary suspensions racked up in just 6 years. He walked away before they could fire him, allegedly padding his resume with 2 phantom years. Meet Chris Nanos. He runs the Pima County Sheriff's Department. And this is the story of how a deeply flawed history might have permanently doomed this investigation. Let us peel back the layers. Before dissecting his catastrophic failures in the Guthrie case, you must understand who he was long before Nancy vanished. Make no mistake, this was not a competent leader who suddenly cracked under the intense media spotlight. His entire career was built on a foundation of red flags that would have ended most cops. The setting? El Paso, Texas. 1976, a 20-year-old Chris Nanos pins on a badge. They throw him into decoy units, playing human bait to flush out corner hustlers and street operators. But almost immediately, the shiny new rookie starts collecting disciplinary write-ups like trophies. But nobody knew yet. Not just one incident. Across 6 turbulent years in Texas, he spent 37 days suspended without pay. The rap sheet was staggering, ghosting entire patrol shifts, illegal off-duty gambling, and blatant insubordination towards superior officers. Then came the violence. Law enforcement logs uncovered by the Arizona Republic paint a disturbing picture near the tail end of his El Paso run. Evidence suggested a brutal takedown. Nanos allegedly stomped a robbery suspect during an apprehension, delivering enough trauma to put the man on life support. The department slapped him with a 15-day suspension. It was the heaviest disciplinary blow they had dealt him yet. Internal Affairs branded his behavior as consistent inefficiency. Translation? The brass was quietly loading the gun to terminate him completely. He beat them to the punch. He handed over his badge in 1982, and magically, 2 extra years appeared on his service record during the move west. His official public dossier claimed his Texas tenure wrapped up in 1984. It actually ended in 1982. When reporters from the Arizona Republic cornered his team about the blatant lie this week, things got tense. A frantic spokesperson brushed off the forged timeline as a simple administrative glitch with 0 intent to deceive. Noticeably absent from that statement, any denial that he quit just steps ahead of the firing squad. Flash forward. He touches down in Pima County, meticulously crafting a flawless new persona and clawing his way up the command chain. He seizes the sheriff's star. But by 2015, the FBI comes knocking, launching a massive probe over stolen civil asset forfeiture cash. We're talking about seized syndicate money. Funds legally mandated to protect the streets were vanishing into thin air. Federal agents uncovered a blatant slush fund, hundreds of thousands of dollars quietly funneled into lavish award banquets, and $20,000 vanished into building a commercial cafe right inside headquarters. A lucrative business linked directly to his second-in-command's niece. That top deputy, Chris Radke, was slapped with a devastating federal indictment in 2016. Crushed beneath the weight of the impending trial, Radke tragically ended his own life. The sheriff walked away uncharged. No handcuffs for him. But this massive corruption ring operated directly under his roof, on his watch, and his reaction revealed the grim reality of a broken system. He marched onto local Tucson television and arrogantly dismissed the entire FBI probe as absolute garbage. That was his first mistake. He declared absolute outrage toward the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He dared federal agents to publicly confess the entire probe was garbage. Former Chief Deputy Richard Castigar told the Daily Mail that Nanos harbored bitter resentment over a 2015 investigation, and that intense hatred, that vendetta dictated every choice made during the Guthrie mystery. Now facing the November 2024 ballot, Nanos was desperately fighting for re-election. His rival was Lieutenant Heather Lappin, his very own officer. Weeks before voting, Nanos threw Lappin on administrative leave, confining her at home during work hours to cripple her campaign. He also benched Sergeant Aaron Cross, the deputy's union president. Cross was photographed holding a sign stating, "Deputies do not want Nanos." Both exiled officers immediately slapped the department with federal lawsuits. County Supervisor Matt Hines begged federal prosecutors to investigate these shadowy tactics as blatant election tampering. Nanos scraped by with just 481 votes across the entire county. What kind of commander exiles his union boss over a cardboard sign? What kind of sheriff silences his political rival right before Election Day instead of facing her openly? That is pure cowardice. Over 44 years, this man learned a dark lesson. When threatened, you do not engage. You simply eliminate the threat. Long before Nancy Guthrie vanished, 85 of 86 Pima County deputies had already cast a vote of no confidence against Nanos. 98%. These were never just internet armchair critics. These cops rode in his cruisers, executed his search warrants, processed his crime scenes, and hunted killers. 98% stared at their commander and declared, "We do not trust this man's leadership." That damning verdict came down long before Nancy vanished. It had nothing to do with the botched missing persons case. It condemned the monster he already was. This was the controversial figure arriving at Nancy Guthrie's home on February 1st. During those initial crucial hours, he actually made smart calls. He arrived personally, a rarity for missing persons cases. He admitted to reporters. He quickly summoned homicide detectives. He recognized this was no routine vanishing act. Nancy's confirmed blood pooled near the entryway. Someone had violently ripped the security camera off the porch. Crucial survival medication sat abandoned on the counter. Evidence suggested Nanos actually read the brutal, highly calculated attack perfectly. Spotting red flags and running a clean investigation are completely different beasts. That catastrophic gap in competence trapped this nightmare for 6 weeks. That property required a permanent forensic lockdown, hunting an abductor holding an elderly victim with 0 sightings and absolutely no ransom demands. Alongside biological fluids at the breach point, you lock the perimeter, you crawl. You call experts. Investigators must painstakingly photograph every single footprint, doorknob, and microscopic trace left by the predator. You never release it after 20 hours. But Nanos did, unleashing a circus of contamination that elite crime analysts deem completely historically negligent. Enter Ambiance Pool Service. A random contractor with 0 property connection arrived and was casually escorted out back by the sheriff's own deputy. The business told TMZ they never even serviced Nancy's residence before. Then, a full landscaping crew arrived, dragging equipment. Someone actually ordered hot pizza directly to the active crime scene. A medical caretaker wandered right through the halls. Journalists from major networks casually approached the doorstep, snapping high-resolution photos of Nancy's dried blood. Internet sleuths swarmed, while locals testified that after the initial lockdown, 0 consistent police presence guarded the sacred ground. The killer's tracks were fading fast. Consider Locard's exchange principle. Established over 100 years ago, This unbreakable forensic law guarantees every physical contact leaves a trace. Every random stranger tramping through that yard shed DNA, stray hairs, and boot prints. All this garbage blended directly into the killer's silent confession. Each careless footprint blurs the scientific truth, handing slick defense attorneys the ultimate courtroom advantage. A ruthless trial lawyer never has to prove their client was elsewhere. They just must convince a jury the science is corrupted. And this fragile environment was totally destroyed before dawn broke. Then federal agents rushed back to the chaotic house. Why? Because detectives somehow entirely missed a surveillance camera bolted to the roof. The primary sweep of Arizona's most critical missing persons case missed a massive electronic witness. Authorities eventually flew in Google software engineers just to attempt desperate data recovery. Renowned forensic death investigator Joe Scott Morgan analyzed the aftermath, labeling the horrifying negligence a catastrophic collapse of basic protocol. But nobody knew why. He pointed out a glaring failure: zero gatekeepers. No one controlled the scene. No one logged names. No one tracked the foot traffic. He warned that every person crossing that threshold left a biological footprint, permanently trashing the scene. Then he delivered a bombshell, one that should haunt Sheriff Nanos forever. The genetic goldmine required to solve this case? It might have been destroyed by the exact people trusted to protect it. Aaron Cross, the union boss Nanos, suspended over a protest sign, admitted to the New York Post that the department was spiraling. That was a polite way to frame a devastating truth. The deputies knew the investigation was botched from day one. Then came the lab choice. Here, a 2015 vendetta mutated into a fatal investigative flaw. Investigators pulled a contaminated biological mixture directly from Nancy's living room. That critical sample holding the phantom suspect's DNA got boxed up and mailed off to a private facility in Florida. They completely bypassed the FBI laboratory division down in Quantico, Virginia. Quantico houses the most elite forensic technology on the planet, armed with rapid response protocols designed strictly for abducted victims. Because when someone is snatched, the clock is your enemy. Speed is the absolute barrier between survival and death. Nanos casually told NBC the results could take a year. His excuse? He refused to divide the physical evidence. He claimed the Florida lab already held prior samples, insisting it was logically sound to keep the batch together. Former Arizona Supreme Court Justice Andrew Gould tore that logic apart on Fox News, declaring the sheriff actively blocked the investigation. A Supreme Court judge dropping the word impeded on national television? That was no accidental slip of the tongue. That was a brilliant legal mind deploying a highly specific, damning accusation. Then there were the gloves, found roughly 2 miles away from Nancy's residence. They tested them. The DNA hit? A random local restaurant worker. A complete ghost with absolutely zero ties to the abduction. The silver bullet lead was dead on arrival. Now, only one profile matters: that contaminated mix sitting in a Florida lab. But nobody knew yet what was coming. The public narrative suddenly splintered, evolving from miscommunication into outright deception. An official FBI source leaked to News Nation that agents actually recovered a glove inside Nancy's house. Yet that exact same day, Nanos stared into a Fox News camera and swore no glove was ever found indoors. He insisted the property was clean. 2 massive institutions, 1 critical piece of evidence, 2 completely contradictory stories. Back in early February, during those crucial first hours, Nanos publicly declared that every single person was a suspect. He stressed the word everybody. Standard police procedure: keep all your avenues open and trust no one. But by February 16th, he completely flipped. He suddenly cleared the entire Guthrie family, spouses included. He called the internet sleuths cruel. He branded it shameful. But here is the twist. While defending them publicly, his detectives were still secretly raiding Annie and Tommaso's property, still snapping photos, still bagging items. Their car rotted in an impound lot for weeks after they were allegedly cleared. 4 massive news giants, ABC, CBS, NBC, and C/N, started digging. Their independent police sources confirmed a chilling detail. A masked figure stalked Nancy's porch multiple times before she vanished. They had the receipts. Surveillance images caught the phantom, sometimes carrying gear, scoping out the target on separate, terrifying visits. The sheriff's office dropped a written statement, calling the reporting purely speculative. That was the first mistake. Instead of holding structured, simultaneous press briefings, Nanos isolated reporters for shady one-on-one interviews. Fox News heard one story. NBC got a different spin. The Daily Mail and BBC received completely alternate realities. Every interview birthed a totally different, inconsistent timeline of the ongoing investigation. Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent James Gagliano labeled this a catastrophic communications breakdown. He pointed out the reckless drip feed of facts. Critical details were leaked, then frantically retracted. Statements were butchered. Former FBI agent Robin Drake linked this severe communication disaster directly to the flawed investigation. He painted Nanos as a void of white noise, swallowing the media's attention. The sheriff sucked up the oxygen, generating enough controversy to keep the press fixated on his ego rather than evidence. Suddenly, the headlines were all about Nanos, his lies, his endless camera time, and while Nanos stole the spotlight, the true focus vanished. Nobody discussed the DNA, the suspect, or Nancy, but Drake saw a darker undercurrent, a systemic failure far deeper than fumbled press conferences. Evidence suggested a staggering 98% no-confidence vote completely fractured the department, forcing lead investigators to hide critical case updates from their own boss. They realized any detail handed to leadership risked becoming premature headline fodder on national television by dawn. It would be twisted, leaked early, or clash completely with whatever narrative had just aired. Detectives built a wall to protect the investigation. Command was left speaking entirely in the dark. His press briefings became disastrous. Media outlets instantly tore apart every glaring inconsistency. The actual manhunt operated quietly in the shadows, completely bypassing leadership while chaos consumed the public narrative. That toxic internal war set the stage for a massive tragedy. It paved the way for utterly catastrophic blunders. We aren't just talking about terrible optics. These calculated missteps likely obliterated crucial evidence, permanently slamming shut the best paths to Nancy. The most devastating casualty of all involved the Bluetooth signal. Nancy's internal pacemaker constantly transmitted digital pulses. Authorities mounted specialized tech onto a chopper, sweeping the barren desert skies around her home to hunt for that specific frequency. Even a whisper of a pulse would give them an exact, pinpointed burial location. A perfect, invisible trap, warrantless and utterly silent. That was the first mistake. The media broadcasted this secret weapon before the search grid was ever completely swept. The trap snapped shut, empty. Whoever took Nancy realized their fatal mistake simply by watching the nightly news broadcast. After that catastrophic leak, the heartbeat vanished forever. Meanwhile, Command established a rigid 2-mile search radius around the victim's property. Yet home surveillance 2.5 miles out caught a mysterious car at 2:36 in the morning on February 1st. That synced flawlessly with the pacemaker dying just 8 minutes prior. But that critical lens sat out of bounds. Those homeowners proactively handed over the tape after seeing television reports. Detectives never bothered to knock. It took almost 4 agonizing weeks for Command to finally widen the net. Then came the border lies. Leadership boasted about joining forces with Mexico, a terrifying possibility since Tucson sits 60 miles north, meaning Nancy could easily have been smuggled down Interstate 19. Yet Mexican officials bluntly told journalists that nobody ever asked for help, destroying American claims of joint teamwork. The phone south of the border never rang. It was yet another official narrative completely shattered by basic facts. Consider the Madres Buscadores. This elite civilian unit pulled over 5,000 lost souls from identical desert landscapes. They drove straight to Arizona just to find Nancy. Authorities locked them out. The Cajun Navy volunteered their entire operational fleet. Command met them with total silence. Former FBI agent Coffindaffer demanded to know why leadership actively blocked world-class search teams, while Savannah begged the abductor on camera, offering a $1 million cash bounty under a national spotlight. The sheriff sat courtside at an Arizona basketball game. Days later, he took the national television stage. He looked the correspondent in the eye and promised they were closing in, hinting he finally understood why monsters chose Nancy. Swearing he truly believed she was still breathing, he delivered a chilling warning about the community's own false sense of security. But veteran operative Steve Moore went on a leading true crime podcast and shattered that optimism with a bleak, uncompromising reality check. He explained exactly why that massive seven-figure payout was just gathering dust. The predators who pulled this off are the only ones holding the answers. They haven't breathed a word. No terrified bystanders are hiding in the shadows. No guilty accomplices are sweating over a plea deal. The vault is locked tight. Hearing that from a federal veteran changes the entire landscape. Forget about a miraculous phone call breaking things wide open. The only path forward relies entirely on microscopic genetics through deep cell tower pings, through ancestral bloodlines, and dissecting 10,000 hours of video frame by agonizing frame. Science must find what humanity missed. And Moore's final thought was utterly terrifying. He didn't mince words. If money didn't fuel this nightmare, then a much darker hunger did, and that hunger never stays fed. Getting away with murder only makes them crave it more. The cycle simply solidifies. When a predator strikes someone completely defenseless and faces zero consequences, they absorb the most terrifying lesson in the criminal playbook. They learn that the violence actually works. Sheriff Nanos essentially admitted this terrifying reality during his public warning on NBC. But offering lip service is a far cry from actually catching a monster. 42 days of nodding along without an arrest is not progress. That is systemic stagnation holding a microphone. This week, the FBI successfully pulled new images from all three cameras stationed at Nancy's house: the pool, the backyard, and the side yard angles. These are just static thumbnails, zero actual video. ABC News reports these stills caught figures in her yard right before the abduction, yet investigators somehow claimed nothing looked suspicious. Unknown figures in her yard right before the nightmare began. Law enforcement quickly buried that chilling detail. Exactly who was violating her safe space, and at what hour, remains a completely guarded secret. Nancy Grace revealed a critical detail this week. Our victim likely owned a backup pair of hearing aids, vital devices she might have been wearing when the predator struck. A digital forensics expert explained on Grace's broadcast that modern hearing devices basically operate like Apple AirPods. They ping through Bluetooth, leaving a digital breadcrumb trail, but Nancy's phone was left dead on her nightstand. Without that crucial hub, tracing those invisible footprints becomes almost entirely impossible. Detectives finally admitted knowing about a brutally vandalized utility box sitting dangerously close to Nancy's home. Sheriff Nanos quickly insisted his department sees absolutely zero connection to this horrific crime, yet evidence suggested a targeted blackout, where security cameras on one half of a property mysteriously died while the other angles kept quietly rolling. A smashed electrical box inside that exact strike zone is never a clue you just blindly dismiss without microscopic examination. Which leads us straight into the unexplained Wi-Fi blackout. How leadership handled that crucial development reveals the agonizingly sluggish, broken pulse of this entire manhunt. On March 6th, exactly 34 days into this agonizing nightmare, FBI agents finally knocked on doors across Nancy's street, asking if anyone lost internet the night the monster arrived. 34 days. For 5 entire weeks, not a single badge bothered asking locals if their security feeds actually functioned during the ambush. The neighbors whose Ring cameras suspiciously flatlined on the side facing Nancy's house, they had absolutely no idea their footage was missing until they manually checked the logs themselves. Not a single cop ever told them to check. But when they finally reviewed the data, a chilling truth emerged. Their dog had startled them awake the exact second those lenses died, pacing erratically, staring intently toward Nancy's walls. The panicked dog, the blinded cameras, the timing. That intelligence existed from day one. It took 5 agonizing weeks for a detective to even ask. Evidence suggested a digital jamming device, a smashed power box, targeted camera sabotage, and an animal sensing a phantom the technology entirely missed. Every single anomaly clustered tightly around Nancy's property line. All of those crucial breadcrumbs sat there during that vital first week, yet nothing was explored publicly until the deep middle of month 2. The boots on the ground, those 4 devoted officers and the sergeant operating inside the FBI's Tucson hub are genuinely grinding out the grueling work this tragedy demands. The exhaustive cell tower dumps, the cutting-edge genetic genealogy, the agonizing frame-by-frame video scrub, the router log dives, the forensic rebuilding. Those exhausted investigators never got a say in their flawed leadership. Instead, they are trapped inside a failing hierarchy commanded by a sheriff who racked up 37 days of disciplinary suspensions before legally renting a car. A man who aggressively called an FBI investigation into his own department utter garbage. A boss whose own deputies rejected him 98-2. A sheriff who surrendered a crime scene in hours, mailed DNA to the wrong laboratory, and openly fought his federal partners on live television. He torched a pacemaker tracking sting by leaking it, and mapped a search grid that completely missed critical evidence. He rejected elite rescue groups, boasting thousands of successful recoveries. He casually attended a basketball game during an active kidnapping crisis. And he stood before cameras this week, arrogantly claiming he knows exactly why she was taken, yet offered a terrified public nothing but a hollow warning to lock their doors. This twisted case will unravel. The forensic science is relentlessly hunting the truth, even if leadership failed. Revolutionary genetic genealogy unmasked the Golden State Killer after 40 agonizing years of silence. That science tied Brian Kohberger to the Idaho murders within mere weeks. This tech does not beg for tips. It does not need a confession. It just needs one distant relative in a database, one rogue branch on a family tree, one name. And when that ghost takes a name, when the DNA locks, and those cell tower pings violently collapse onto one specific device, when 10,000 grueling hours of surveillance tape spit out the one frozen frame exposing the vehicle, the haunting question will no longer be who committed this atrocity. The true outrage will center on how much faster could this have been closed if the crime scene had simply been locked down, if her DNA was shipped straight to Quantico, if the desperate search grid covered 3 miles instead of 2, if that sensitive pacemaker tracking sting was simply allowed to finish its digital sweep, and if the chief directing this entire manhunt was not the exact same man who brutally kicked a suspect in the head down in El Paso, spending his next 4 decades desperately making sure the public never found out. Nancy Guthrie's crucial nighttime prescriptions, that 10 p.m. dose she required immediately following her January 31st drop-off, sat perfectly undisturbed on the kitchen island. Even her essential hearing aids never left the house. Her mobile phone rested abandoned on the nightstand. Her vehicle sat parked inside the garage. This vulnerable 84-year-old woman was just gone. At barely 150 pounds, she vanished into thin air. Nobody has seen her since that pacemaker transmitted its final, chilling heartbeat at exactly 2:28 a.m. By day 3 of this unraveling investigation, Sheriff Nanos gave reporters a statement. It quickly aged into the single most damning soundbite of his professional career. He stated on the record, "I am just not accustomed to the public dissecting my every word and then actually demanding accountability for my claims." And honestly, he was absolutely right. He was completely unaccustomed to it. The man operated for decades, shielded from any real public microscope. That staggering 98% no-confidence vote somehow skipped national headlines. Even the 2015 Federal Bureau probe failed to broadcast his failures across American living rooms. Those buried El Paso files gathered dust inside a forgotten cabinet for 44 long years, right up until a local paper finally exposed them. But Nancy Guthrie shattered that comfortable silence forever. Now, the untouchable sheriff is facing the wrath of an entire angry nation. Millions are watching his systemic failure unfold. Because somebody out there knows the truth, evidence suggested the forensic labs, the digital servers, and those glowing cell tower pings are closing in on the killer. Justice is coming, whether this broken department is prepared or not. Hit subscribe, trigger those notifications, drop a comment below, and tell me directly, after absorbing every single agonizing detail, do you truly believe this botched investigation delivered the justice Nancy Guthrie so desperately deserved? Because the devastating truth hidden inside that exact question explains exactly why she remains lost in the dark. She remains lost in the dark. And that darkness has a name, a badge number, and a 44-year history of escaping consequences. But here is what Sheriff Nanos never anticipated. Nancy Guthrie is not just another cold case quietly buried inside a forgotten filing cabinet. She is a mother, a grandmother, a woman whose final heartbeat was recorded at 2:28 in the morning, while the man sworn to protect her was asleep at the wheel. Every contaminated footprint in that crime scene, every DNA sample mailed to the wrong laboratory, every search grid drawn 2 miles short, every elite rescue team turned away at the door, every week of silence from a sheriff sitting courtside at a basketball game. Those are not administrative errors. Those are choices. And every single one of those choices belongs to one man. The predator who took Nancy counted on the chaos. They mapped the blind spots. They knew the cameras. They knew the gaps. But they did not count on this. They did not count on millions of people watching, demanding, refusing to look away. They did not count on genetic genealogy slowly, methodically dismantling their ghost story one ancestral branch at a time. They did not count on 10,000 hours of surveillance tape being scrubbed, frame by agonizing frame, by investigators who actually care. The Golden State Killer hid for 40 years. He thought time was his shield. Then science found him in his armchair. Brian Koberger thought powering down his phone made him invisible. He was wrong. The data found him anyway. And whoever walked into Nancy Guthrie's home on the night of January 31st is sitting somewhere right now, breathing free air, believing the same dangerous lie, that they are untouchable, that the broken system protecting them will hold forever, that the silence around them means safety. It does not. Science does not forget. Digital breadcrumbs do not disappear. And a nation of millions does not simply move on. Nancy Guthrie's story is not over. Her family is still waiting. Her last heartbeat is still recorded in a federal database somewhere, demanding an answer. And when the forensic net finally closes, when the DNA locks, when the cell tower pings collapse onto one name, one face, one address, the question will not simply be, who did this? The question will be, how many days did systemic failure steal from Nancy Guthrie? How many chances were buried under contaminated crime scenes, misdirected lab samples, and a sheriff too busy watching basketball to save a life? We are watching. We are not forgetting. And we are not done. Not until Nancy comes home. Not until justice has a name. Hit subscribe. Trigger those notifications. Share this video with everyone who still believes this broken system deserves a free pass. Because the most powerful weapon against institutional failure is a public that refuses to be silenced. Nancy deserves that. Her family deserves that. And somewhere out there, a predator who thought they won is about to find out exactly how wrong they were. We are not done yet.